All of you may have seen some hype on the internet or on YouTube that talks about how you should never flush the transmission fluid in a high mileage vehicle. And if you do, you're probably going to cause transmission damage. Well, the truth is the damage is already there. The fluid is acting like a friction material or friction modifier, and that's why the transmission continues to work. And when you remove high mileage fluid with all those suspended particulates, then you're removing all that clutch material that's been suspended and allowing that transmission to still operate somewhat properly up until that point. And they say that when you flush your transmission fluid, all those particulates come out, you put fresh, high lubricity fluid in there, and everything just kind of works better together, but you have no friction material left, and the transmission just slips. Well, there may be a solution. It depends on how bad your transmission is, and I've got a case study I want to talk to you about in this video. When I bought this 2002 F-150, it had 165,000 miles on the clock, and before I ever heard anything about never flushing transmission fluid in a high mileage vehicle, I flushed the transmission fluid in my high mileage vehicle. Now the way I did this, which is similar to a lot of vehicles that have a transmission cooler in the radiator or elsewhere, I disconnected the return line going into my 4R70W transmission, put a hose on the end, ran that hose into a bucket, started the engine, and ran it until 5 quarts of oil was pumped out of the transmission, which basically emptied the pan. I put 5 quarts of fresh royal purple transmission fluid back in there, ran the engine again until 5 quarts came out, refilled it again with fresh transmission fluid, but the third time I did not refill it. I did 5 quarts, drained it into the bucket, dropped the pan, and did my inspection. And what I found was shocking. That fluid was black, pure black. There was no red tint to it anymore. The magnet was covered with friction material and metal that was probably ground away by all that friction material suspended in the transmission fluid for 165,000 miles. I knew that this transmission had never been serviced because the shipping plug that they put in these Ford transmissions into the fill tube was still in the pan. What they do when they go to the factory for installation, they shove that plug into the pan, they leave it there, and normally when a transmission is serviced, at least a Ford transmission, they drop the pan, that plug is thrown away, change the filter fluid, put it back together. But in this case, because the plug was still there, I knew that my transmission had never been serviced. Shortly after doing this, brand new 13 quarts of fluid and a transmission filter, I started getting a dreaded transmission overdrive shudder, which means that when the vehicle went into overdrive, it would shudder. The whole vehicle would shake. I thought maybe, it feels like you're going over a bump. I thought I was having problems with the engine. I thought I was having problems with the drive line. Did a lot of research. It turns out it's a drive line, it's overdrive shudder. And when I called all the transmission experts, they said the only thing to be done is minimum change the torque converter, but what you really should do is just rebuild the entire transmission. Now here's where I get to the options that are available. I was still able to drive my truck, surprisingly. It wasn't driving as good as it did when I still had the original transmission fluid in there, but because I could drive it, I decided that what I was going to do through some additional investigation was to really improve the fluid management in that vehicle. Now with a vehicle that's 20 years old, 165,000 miles on it, all the tolerances within that transmission are much looser. So I proceeded to pull the valve body. I rebuilt it with a shift kit. I put all new valves in that valve body, increased spring pressures, changed all the shift accumulators, changed the shift solenoids, the torque converter control solenoid, the EPC solenoid, put all fresh fluid in there. And this dramatically improved the performance, but I was still getting that overdrive shudder, so it wasn't a perfect fix. So I thought, all right, let's take a couple more steps. The first thing I did was I bought some Lucas transmission treatment, transmission Fixx. It's a quart bottle, and you replace 1 quart of your transmission fluid with this Lucas. I did that, and I got a little bit more incremental improvement. But even though that did not completely fix it, I decided I was going to take one more step. And I went and bought Dr. Lube. It's in a little red container, and this adds additional friction material in your transmission. You drop that in. I ended up dropping 2 tubes of this in there. The transmission settled itself out. It runs about probably 85-90% good. I still get a little bit of clunkiness, but it's been dependable. I'm up to 250,000 miles, so I've added, what is that? That's 85,000 miles since I did that transmission flush. and the truck is running great. I pull a 4,000 or 5,000 pound boat with it. I go long distances. I don't hesitate to go long distances. And what I do now is I change my transmission. I actually don't change it. I drain the fluid. I replace the fluid that's in the pan, or replace the filter. But I also do this by adding 1 quart of Lucas transmission Fixx, and I may add another one of those Dr. Lube tubes. And it's been running perfectly. So that's my normal treatment now. And it made me realize that I need to change transmission fluid in my vehicles every 30 to 50,000 miles, whether they're manual or automatic transmission. So the moral of the story is, if you decided to go ahead and do a flush, I'm not recommending you do a flush on a high mileage vehicle. Quite frankly, I think it's very risky. At the maximum, what you want to do is drop the pan and just change the fluid in the pan and put some friction modifier in there. But generally, a lot of the experts say don't do this. But if you did do it and you got much poorer performance, but it's still operating, you can try what I did. I'm going to link all those videos in a playlist here and below. I'll list the Lucas transmission Fixx, and I'll also link the Dr. Lube in the description of this video. You can check those things out, try those things, and perhaps you can resurrect your transmission to give you many more miles of service. Like I said, I'm on 85,000 miles since I did that transmission flush, and the truck is running great. So, hope you like this. If you got any comments, please comment below. Give me that thumbs up. See you next time on Driving Intelligence.